I brought two members from Saskatoon down, and Faith is also a member from straight up, but she's living here in Regina now. So, what's that? You're visiting?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, she's visiting and she's able to join us. But we have Shane Tasa in the back, David Johnson, and then we have Faith. And they're going to come up and they're going to speak too. Because whenever I try and do this, I try not to just have me talking, because it gets boring. And I'd rather have them because it's their stories that the research is based around, and they can tell it a lot better than I can. I'm just trying to put things together. So, first, and I know this is a small group, and I'm going to rush through this a little bit. If I'm going too fast or you want me to repeat, please feel free to stop me and just say, can you just elaborate on that a little bit for me? And also, for this section here, if I say something wrong, call me on my, yeah, you can do that. Whatever you need to do. Talk about the vehicle on the way down.
Do you want me to advance the slides for you?
That's okay. I'm pretty laid back. I'm not a very stickly person. I need to be in a certain place, so we can adapt. It's okay. First of all, I got involved in this, in researching street gangs back in 99, 2000. I was playing hockey, and I ended up going back to Prince Albert. I ended up having a fight with my hockey coach. Not one of those little spats, but an actual fist fight on the ice, and I said I couldn't play anymore. So I ended up going back to Prince Albert. And I started working at a community school because my auntie was the vice principal there. And I come from a big family. My grandpa had 21 brothers and sisters, large Métis family in Prince Albert, basically half the west side of Prince Albert during the early 80s was my family. The Fox Farm, on the other side of the river was the other half of the family, so it was a fun time. But I grew up down there, and it was, you can see the changes happening. And if we take what a gang is now and what we were doing back then as cousins, well, we would be that. We were doing everything that you could possibly think of. But the one thing that protected us was our family, who our family was within the community. We weren't seen as low socioeconomic. We weren't rich. We were working poor at the time. But all of that held. And the other thing that I always tell people that protected me over everything else is that I have white skin. Because I'm a white skin Métis. And that allows me a lot of freedom, I can camouflage my way into a lot of places. I am not seen to be that. So that's where I grew up. But in 99, 2000, this is when the street gang issue started to become more prevalent within Prince Albert anyways. It wasn't until 2005 where Saskatoon actually acknowledged that there were street gangs in Saskatoon. Regina was about 2003 they acknowledged that there was a presence in Regina. Yeah, it's funny when you hear about the stories and everything else. But so I was there, and what happened was the teachers, it was a K-8 school, it was Queen Mary Community School. If anybody has a background in community schools, it was the very first community school in Saskatchewan, the prototype that everything started following after. So it was high Aboriginal, low socioeconomic students that were there. And they started hearing this idea of, at the time in Prince Albert, it was the West Side Boys, and Tribal Brothers were in there. And so those teachers were starting to get scared because they kept hearing these things, and they kept seeing these kids walking around. So they brought the police in just to try and talk to them. And the police really had nothing to say. All they said was that this is what's going on. We're seeing an increase in some drug trafficking and sort of that. Then the violence is kind of coming. But how they defined street gangs was really interesting. It really caught my eye because basically what they said was, well, any kid wearing a backwards New York Yankee baby blue hat or tilted to the side a little bit. And not the dark blue, but the actual baby blue hat. I was like, okay. And if you know Prince Albert is a community that I would love to get a bunch of research money and do research in that community because it is so interesting. It's so divided. There's the rich, the poor, the Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal, all of those dynamics are really interesting there. But anyways, so I asked them, I said, so are you talking about the kids on the hill on the east side with the upper middle class kids who were wearing those hats? Because they were. Well, no, not those kids. Are you talking about the kids on the west flat, on the west hill, who were just above this, living in $500,000 houses, and if you look down, there's $20,000 houses underneath them on this hill? No, not those kids. Or the kids on the east side? No. So basically what you're saying is that only Aboriginal kids wearing a baby blue backwards hat are your gang members. Well, yeah, because they're the ones who commit the crime. So I thought, holy cow, this is kind of interesting. So it kept in the back of my mind because that's the kids who I was working with. That's who I was brought in to work with. I was brought in to work with the kids to keep them in school, and to help work with their teachers, to try and create relationships with their teachers and everything else. So anyways, I moved through with the SUNTEP. Long story short, graduated from SUNTEP, got accepted into a master's program with the University of Hawaii and the University of Saskatchewan, 2 years there, 2 years here. I went traveling for a year and the program fell through. So then I got stuck at the University of Saskatchewan in the College of Education, Indian Northern Education program with Verna St. Denis, Marie Batiste, Margaret Kovach, Alex Wilson, Carla Williams, and so a very strong, and they were all on my committee at one time, because they would all go on sabbatical. And I was joking around with them, saying that I was like the foster kid in the Educational Foundations Department because I got bounced around from every single person. They would work with me for about 6 months, and then they would have to go on sabbatical for 6 months for health reasons. So I said, it's my fault. There's one thing that's going along here, and it's mine. But what it was there's other things going on in the college at that time, and, but it was amazing because they were so different and so strong as Aboriginal women, and they really put me in my place. They really they shaped who I was and who I was thinking and how I came into this. And when I was doing my master's thesis, it was looking at the implications of definitions around youth gangs. Because when I started in 2006, as I said, Saskatchewan didn't acknowledge it as a gang problem. In 2006, they came up with the anti-gang strategy of Saskatoon, and you open the first page, and it says right there in big block letters that there is no definition of a street gang in Saskatoon, but they have 100 pages to deal with it. So I thought, holy cow, how are you dealing with an issue that you haven't even defined what you're doing? So basically all it was 100 pages on how to deal with Aboriginal kids on the west side of Saskatoon, because all of it was directed within specific topics. So that's where my master's thesis came out of. And I worked with service providers because I was told that I wasn't smart enough to work with people, which was fine. It's a learning curve, right? It's a learning curve. You either take it and you take it as a slap in the face, or you look at it as it's a learning curve. I took it as a learning curve that I wasn't ready to do that yet, because that was when the Tri-Council and CRHR was changing everything, and OCAP was all starting to become really put into place. And a lady who was doing her PhD had to go and defend, working with street women at the time, had to go defend for 3 hours and said, you're not ready to defend in front of a board of people that long to try and work with you. So just figure out a different way. So that's how I got into this. I put this up because I didn't know who I was going to be speaking with today. So I try and assume who I'm going to be speaking with, or there might be somebody in the audience. But this is just real simple. Within communities, a lot of people just kind of assume that they just pop up. The gangs are just magically appear out of thin air, that they just kind of start. But it's not true. They need something to start from. And gangs are the result of a complex process that stem from multiple levels of forces over a period of time. The macro-historical is not macro-structural. If we look at the history of street gangs, where they started, what we see today, they started from the early Irish gangs, early Jewish gangs of the Eastern Seaboard. And what it was just kids that weren't wanted. They didn't have any parents because they were coming across, they lost their parents overseas. They were coming into a community that didn't want them, so how did you have to survive? Well, Dave has something and he's there, and I'm a poor kid. If I go up and try and take it from him, it's pretty easy to stop the person one-on-one. However, if I'm working with a team with Shane and I come and distract Dave, Shane comes and grabs it and we divide what's there, then we can survive together. And that's how it actually, these gangs we're seeing today, that's where it all started from, was this bonding of youth to survive within their new environments where they weren't wanted. And we saw this, and you can see this as it moves forward from a historical perspective. After emancipation happened, free blacks moved north. So this is where you get the white privilege with the Irish, where the abolitionist movement, this is where your white supremacy comes in. The abolitionist movement was focusing on trying to show that the Irish had more in common with the free blacks than they actually did with the upper middle class white people because of their social positioning and economics. However, whiteness is so powerful that they said, no, we are not like them. And so they moved into it, and then the African Americans, the free blacks, came and they started to take those spaces that the Irish were moving out of because they started segregating. And the Irish became the police and the fire within that. And soon they moved into political office where they became councillors of cities and everything else. Then on the western seaboard, we had a Latino influx during the gold rush. And again, white people didn't want to go pick their own lettuce. They didn't want to do any of the menial jobs. They needed people for low wages to come and do the work. So they had it, but then they policed them and said, here you go, this is where you're living. You can't live outside of those areas. So as you see, we construct where it's going on, we limit their opportunities, we say that you're not good enough to be outside, and when you are put outside, we police you to make sure you go back in. So, and now we use different institutions to do this. We use education as one. A lot of the individuals within my study have all said that, yeah, we had some good teachers that were good sometimes, but for the most part, I didn't feel like I belonged. I was always called the dirty Indian. I was always called a savage, or any derogatory term was directed at them. And so we're looking at kids who are kindergarten 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're starting to frame all of this. They're just not wanted or belong within those systems. So we look at this from an Indigenous perspective, and to me, colonization, I get into some discussions with individuals in the Department of Native Studies, because some of them up there are coming from the framework of post-colonial structures within Indigenous communities. I don't believe in that. I don't even believe Canada is post-colonial yet, because we still pay homage to the Queen and everything else until we actually get rid of the Queen on everything that we do in the monarchy. Then we can start calling us post-colonial. We're still decolonizing ourselves from the British monarchy and everything else. But when I talk to students, because a lot of them have a hard time, they see it as colonization as a thing in the past, or that it was just residential schools or the Indian Act or something. And I say, no, if we look at colonization a little bit broader, we can actually start understanding what it has, how it's impacted, and how it continues to impact. And Fabani, to me, does a very good job where colonialism created an order based on absolute violence. And through this violence, it's just for resources. They just created a thing, something different, and it's to extract resources. We can take it as resources as people, so we can look at the slave trade and how colonization in the Africas use people and use them as resources to move around. We look at the fur trade in Canada, you look at the carps, you look at everything that was ever been done. A lot of it is all around based on resources, and we still see it today. We still see Aboriginal lands being colonized in order to gain resources. We look at the tar sands, we look at the diamond mines, we look at uranium mines, we look at the Keystone Pipeline and everything else that's going on. It's all about resource extraction. And it's this continuing colonization over Indigenous lands that continue, and we exploit. The other thing that we need to understand, and whenever I talk to people, whenever they ask me to go into a class and talk, I say the only reason why I'm here is for 5 letters. It's not my research, it has nothing to do with that, it's about gangs. That's a hook. Everybody thinks that gangs are out there to get them, that they're here to damage the community. And this is from a book forward from Inside the Crips. It's Colton Simpson, who is considered an original gangster. He was there with T. Williams and everything with the founding of the Crips back in the 1970s. But Ice-T was one of his buddies, and he wrote the forward, and he puts it really nice. Society has always had a love-hate reaction to the ghetto. Getting rid of the ghetto and economic inequality is never going to happen in this particular society. This is capitalism, and we need our status quo. We'll always have people who haven't gotten their foot up. Back in the day, it was Irish people and Jewish people. Now the black and Mexicans fill the ghettos. The fear factor is part of the game. Our society wants to turn a certain element into monsters, certain locations into scary places. Society wants to make you think the gangs aren't organized and don't know what they're doing. White people believe gangs are after them. The gangs aren't even thinking about them. And that is probably the biggest reality in all of this, is that gangs aren't thinking about the upper middle class. They aren't thinking about coming onto campus. They aren't thinking of this. Yet the people with power, we've created this fear factor of gangs, that they're after us, they're going to get us, we can't let our kids out because they're going to get attacked by all this. In reality, unless you're in the lifestyle that they're in, you're not even going to know what's going on within the community. The other thing that it helps do is it helps policing efforts. It helps us to maintain cultures of fear. So when we look at it through media, you look at Winnipeg. In 2002, the National Youth Gang Survey was done across Canada, and Saskatoon was rated the highest youth gang in all of Canada, percentage. The next closest city was Regina, and then Brandon, then Edmonton, Thunder Bay, and one on the BC. But Winnipeg at the time was considered the gang capital of Canada, and they were actually about 9th on the list. What happened was, and this is where the political part comes in, and this creation of fear, was the police were fighting for monies at the time. They needed more monies to grow their police force. With those stats coming out, it kind of displaced everything the police were saying, that this gang issue was happening in Winnipeg. So what happened was, one sergeant went back and said, you missed 2,000 names on this list, and then added 2,000 names onto the list, and then they moved up to another one on the list, just ahead of Saskatoon. So we see that even here, and we have gang databases in Regina, we have them in Saskatoon, and the individuals don't even know they're on them, because I can see you, and if you're hanging out with him and you're wearing colors, and then Shane says, yeah, I saw her hang out, I can put you on that list just by doing that, even if you're friends or your cousins. So this is how we have this idea of these super gang families that are going through. I'm not saying that it's not happening. What I'm saying is that it's being blown out of proportion for what's actually happening out there. And a lot of times, by doing that, we ignore the fact that in a lot of these families, there's also a lot of individuals who don't join in.
So do you actually kind of believe that they're profiling then Aboriginal youth?
Well, of course. It's not even a belief, it's happening.
Yeah.
It's not a belief, it is happening. And you look at police officers, they've done studies in Toronto, in larger urban centers, And what they find is that it's basically policing while black, they're calling it. So if you're an African person in Toronto, you're stopped more often, and they actually have the cards on. This is why it's interesting here in Saskatchewan, they won't allow freedom of information with the police services. Because if we did that, we can actually put cards in there and say, okay, if you're stopping an Aboriginal person, what are you stopping them for? And start collecting that information openly to actually see what's happening within the forces. But because they block that, it's a lot harder to gain that data. And I'm working with the Saskatchewan police, you can't actually access that data because they don't even collect that data right now. So we just have to assume that what they're doing is right. But we know historically that it's not right, that we're already focused, we've already been socialized to assume who is the gang member. Who are they? And a lot of it comes through media misrepresentation. Now, you might know who that person is by looking right over to your other side here. But this was Dave. And this was done, I don't know if you've heard about the Straight Up conference that was in Saskatoon, the 10,000 Human Steps Resiliency Community. So, and I asked Dave if I can put it up there, and he said, yeah, sure. So it might get taken down this evening one after I talk here, so we'll let it go. But this was in the newspaper. So, do you want to talk about this, or do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah,
Okay. Dave told his story, and he was up there, and he was talking about 30, 40 minutes up on stage about his life and everything else that's going on. There's a reporter there, and everybody who's there, basically at the end, at the table I was at anyways, were like very somber, very loud, like a very powerful story that he said. So there's a reporter there from Start Famous. The day afterwards, can we take a picture? We want to do a story about everything else, et cetera. So they take this picture of him walking down the street, which, if we look at it and we just analyze that picture, we can start already pulling things out. It's like, what are they portraying with just that picture? This was what was written in the newspaper. Problem is, yes, it's true, but it's so condensed and lacks the actual reality of what's going on that it portrays exactly what the society thinks we should be seeing for gang members. His father wasn't around. Well, his dad was around. He was working all the time. And his dad moved to Regina, and he ended up going to live with his dad in Regina. So it wasn't that his dad was around. He knew his dad growing up. At age 12, his sister hung out with a tough crowd. He wasn't wanted in his school because of what was going on and everything else that was happening in the school. Hey, little bro, come here. Don't know if they use those words with you, but we'll say that. Here you go, try it, come with us. So here we get a sense of acceptance, because he was beating people up at the school and doing everything else, and so he wasn't wanted in the school, but here we have this older group that's accepting him. Joined the gang, bouncing out of jail until nearly failed drug binge, forced him to devalue his life. Yeah. But what it all does, it just plays off of our common misconceptions or common perceptions of what's going on. These aren't misconceptions, it does happen. But it's so generalized that we don't actually understand the social factors that led to a lot of the decisions that was being made. And so because of it, it helps promote these ideas that gangs are scary, that we have to get the kids away from these families, we have to move the kids away from these neighborhoods, we have to move. So we support the child welfare system without acknowledging that what we're doing to the kids is we're moving them around where they become scared. And if we actually heard Dave's story, he was part of the child welfare system at a young age, and he was scared because every time that somebody would come in, he would be moved from place to place, so there was never stability. So he would hide in closets or everything else because he was afraid to go to the next place until he was adopted by his family. But that's not there. But it helps us to make us feel better about ourselves that we don't live in that type of lifestyle, that type of environment. The other thing that this did was it really caused a rift with him and his family because of it. Because they saw that and they were upset with the way that it came out. So even with this, how do we create ethical journalism? How do we create that? How do we understand that journalists making their stories, especially with around issues such as this, are doing it ethically in a way that don't cause more harm to the people they're trying to get their stories out? So that's a question that, as professors, those in education, if you're going to be doing any of this, or journalism classes, how do we create that ethics where they work better with their people, because the last thing we want to do is put this in a place where individuals are in a worse position than where they were. And we have to understand the power of them. The other thing we have to understand, a lot of people have this idea that they chose to be in the gang. Yes, they didn't make a choice. 100%. Every one of them will admit that they made a choice to join the gang. Problem is that choice is shaped by their environments. And that's why we need to understand the opportunity or habit is what I'm starting to understand a little bit more. So, if you're growing up poor, no clothes, your shoes are wrecked, everybody else has got the iPods and new clothes and everything else, and all of a sudden somebody gives you $100 or $20 to go drop something off somewhere so you can get food, you slowly get hooked into this. Then you get opened up into an environment where you see parties, and you see at a young age you're seeing girls around, you're seeing drugs around, you're seeing individuals with nice clothes and all the bling and everything else, and you're seeing money on the table, and you don't have that. Well, it starts becoming a little bit better because you start seeing the power and the respect that people have with the money. So your choices and your opportunities in order to, because when you're a poor Aboriginal person living in, on the west side of Saskatoon, we'll stick with Saskatoon right now, there aren't a lot of options for you. Case in point, I was teaching at a high-tech class, and a girl was going to Briarwood, which is a rich area in Saskatoon. Aboriginal girl going to a study group, got stopped by the cops. Cops opened up her trunk, opened up her backpack, and everything else. What are you doing here? I'm looking for a study group. You don't belong here. Get back to your side. I was told to go back to the west side of Saskatoon. So even in Saskatoon, you're not wanted. If you're Aboriginal, you're already pinpointed to be who we think you are. So this is why we need to start understanding a little bit more on habits, and especially within the health research, because we always say, well, it's just a lifestyle change, just change your lifestyle. We can't change a lifestyle if there's no opportunity or environment will allow for that change. That's a matter of socialization and adaptation of the individual's ambitions and actions to the social circumstances in which they live. But habits is also a matter of the way in which people react to and actively handle their social circumstances. So this, we also have, it brings it down to another level, because not everybody who lives in those areas do what, become involved with what they became involved with. Some of them resisted it. And there needs to be more research done on that resistance. How are you resisting from this? Especially within families. What is it that where one individual joins but the other one doesn't? Or one person becomes involved with the gang and the other one becomes an IWA or an independent individual, but still part of the lifestyle but doesn't connect to a color. So all of this is kind of part of it. And then I look at hegemonic masculinity. We all know that for the broadest level, to be a man is to be tough, powerful, emotionless, and independent. If we go out here and we ask individuals what is a man, or what are the traits to be a man, those 4 traits will probably be in your top 5 for sure. There might be an odd one that I'm missing here. But most people will list those. Again, this is why habits needs to be understood. We can present that, and we can have that, and even with young kids, if we go into school grounds, we have 2 kids in grade 2 that are wrestling, ruffles, the white kids, ruffles in the school ground. Teachers will walk by, stop, 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 but in their mentality, it's just boys being boys. They're just learning to be men. We have 2 Aboriginal kids doing it on a west side school. Like, it's not boys just being boys anymore, it's boys learning how to be criminals. So we're socializing ourselves to think that, and we act differently within that. Over here, it's socially acceptable at this level. Same activity going on over here, not acceptable. So as we're going through, we can see that there's limited spaces in which individuals can actually portray their masculinity within. And it's in doing so, that's where we can start bringing in these ideas of social determinants of health, and we start looking at other factors. I'm not going to read that whole thing out. But basically, hegemony is a dominant form of masculinity to which other types of masculinity are subordinated, and that provides the primary basis of relationships among men. So we have to understand that a lot of the stuff here is it's bonding. It's bonding between men and their role models. So how did I do this research? For the prelude, I met Andre in 2006 at a gang conference. I said, "Hi Andre, how you doing? I was told to come talk to you by Bill Thibodeau. I'm doing some work with him, et cetera, et cetera." I said, "Hi, how are you doing?" And he didn't like researchers at the time. He didn't like me at the time. And that's the truth. Because researchers and academics were those who were there to exploit them. They exploit the people come straight up. They were there to get their stories and then leave and not do anything about it. So I met Andre in 2006. He gave me his card, met Stan that day too. And over time I built a relationship up. Because I didn't really do work with them right off the bat. What I did was I tried to connect them to different organizations around the city, different pots of money that they might be able to apply for. And I always tried to create those relationships. So ARC, the Aboriginal Education Research Center, I brought them in so that they can start committing forth our work. with the university and working with kids and everything else. I connected them with the behavioral forensic sciences so they can do an evaluation of that and get that sort of stuff. So that's what I did. I wasn't there, I didn't meet any of the members really. None of the members knew who I was until this project started. I was always behind the scenes. Then I found a book by Boogie, and that's where this idea came from. Boogie is he's an artist, he does photography work, and he does he takes pictures. And what he did was he went into New York, into some very deprived neighborhoods, and he started taking pictures and taking stories with the individuals. But he set up the pictures and he took out the pictures. So I thought, you know what, that would be pretty cool to do. What is this like? We keep hearing these stories, but we never get to see the stories that the men are trying to tell us. And I thought that it would give us a deeper understanding of what's happening. So we started to use photo books. And then this is just basically what the research process looked like when I started my method. And no, it's not pretty. I don't have an art degree. This is nice and simple for me, so it makes sense to me. But it all starts with relationships. It's all relational. It doesn't matter if you're doing quantitative research, clinical research, qualitative research, it doesn't matter. It's all relational. Because prior to going in there, you have a relationship to your question or your material that you're having, and that's going to shape how you lecture. The best way I can describe this is the concept of Okultu. One word in Cree means an entire book that we can write with the English language to try and understand what it means. Because Okultu means relationship, not just what we're having here, relationship through time, relationship through our environment, relationship through other people's relationships, and how we all came to be here and how we interact within those relationships. It means so much more than relationships. And so working with elders, that's what I was trying to understand. And I work with elders not because of the project. I work with elders because it's something that I like to do. I like listening to their stories. I like learning from them. They teach me more about life than I've been taught before. And it's the same with members of Straight Up. I was working with, not working with, but I had a meeting with Malcolm King, and we were doing some work on mentors and everything else. I let that last bit. And they asked me, who are your mentors? And I said, the members who I work with, the individuals who are a part of this book are my mentors. And then everybody at that circle looked at me, because I was the last person there, and they said, well, can you explain? I said, sure. We actually listen to what they're telling us. I learn more from them than I do from actually reading a book about how to do community-based research. I learn more from them about life than I could ever experience, because I'm so privileged that I can become blind to what's actually happening. So they're my mentors. So are my academic mentors and everything else, but everybody within that is a mentor. You can learn from anybody. You learn from kids, you learn from herbs, you learn from everything. All of that should be our mentors. We shouldn't just hold people in certain standards because they hold a degree or they're supposed to hold a certain spec. So we created these relationships. And in this line here, Willie Irvine talks about ethical space. And that's where, during the first meeting that I had with him, with the guys, before we started any questions, I always asked them, I said, what do you want to know about me? And who I was. And so what I was trying to do was break down some of those barriers, because what did you think of me when you first saw me?
I can't remember.
Tell me what you told me in the car.
White boy. Oh, yeah, white boy.
White boy. What did you want from me?
Money.
There you go. See? So here it is. So here, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's about being honest, right? So here it is. I'm this white guy. Why do you want to know about me? What is it that you're going to get about me? Who are you? And everything else. So that's what these lines are. These lines are trying to break down that space. I didn't know how else to put it out there, so if you have a better way of doing this, I would love to work with other students to try and bring this out a little more, but maybe there's a postdoc somewhere or something else to try and use it. Hint, hint. But one of the first things that we had to build within this relationship we wanted to grow was respect. They had to at least respect me. I respected them, actually just showing up on campus to do the research. But we had to build some sort of respect. It doesn't have to be high respect, it's just a respect for that person across from you. That's what the ethical space starts breaking up. It's just, how do we create that respect there? I respect your story, you respect my story. We may not agree, but at least we can respect what we're starting from. So from there, we move into relevance, and that's where the book came in. Straight Up had a book coming out just before this, Straight Up in Gangs, The Untold Stories, where it was creative writing. Not everybody's a creative writer, and not everybody could be in the book. So I said, okay, any guy that doesn't want to be in the book can be part of this, and use photos. Do whatever they want to do. They got to figure this out. So they saw, I showed them the book, I said, this is what I want to do, are you interested? They saw the book, they went through, yeah, I'm interested, let's go. So we started the interview process and everything else like that. Then it had to be reciprocal. With photo voice, a lot of photo voice projects, they use the disposable cameras because they're afraid of getting lost, because usually they're working with those marginalized people who, whatever, everything gets in their way. I said, you know what, no, I'm not going to do that, because again, it all goes back to here and all goes back to here. I respected the guys. I wanted them to do the best that they could within this. So what did I do? I went and got digital cameras for them. And I said, they're yours. I don't want them. That's a response, giving back. I don't want the cameras, I just want that little chip in that camera when you're done and you've talked with the photos. You need to sell the camera, sell the camera. If you need to give the camera away, give the camera away. I don't care. It's your camera, it's yours, but let's get some pictures and let's talk about everything else. That's what I want here. Because I knew that as soon as I give them a disposable $5 camera, I had a garbage can outside my room. I guarantee you that I go out there and I still have the first camera there. Unless somebody would be like, well, I don't want to drop it there, and there's a camera, there's a garbage can down the hall, and drop it in there. Like, and they admit it, they would have done it, and it's fine. Also within that, I said that I would print the books, and I would have a book for every one of the people who participated. I'd give one to Straight Up, I'd give one to the organizations that were a part of, who helped me through all of this, and they respect that. And then I said, I'm not collecting any money from the book, because they are for sale now. And all the money goes back to Straight Up. One pocket of money goes back to the organization itself, another pocket goes back to do another print of the book, and another pocket goes back to do research with the organization. Because it's so hard to get research dollars to do little projects here and there, that if we can start doing this, maybe we can start doing other things. And that's where we'll get to a little bit later with the women and the younger individuals of Straight Up who want to kind of do the same thing. And then it comes up into responsibility. Well, I can promise this, but I want to make sure that I get it done. I have to be responsible. And I have to be responsible for what the book looks like. So rather than me just putting the book together and saying, here you go, well done guys, let's go, let's print it, I condensed the stories. Every interview that they came in, I said, you know what, if you are, don't worry about something that you said. If you didn't tell Andre something, you didn't tell Stan something, and you want to take it out after, let's take it out after. I'm going to transcribe it, give it back to you. If there's something you don't want in there, we'll black it out. So we'll make it look like George Bush's army record. Like we'll put one word on a page, it doesn't matter, we'll black it out, and you can watch me go to the tape, and we'll go right to where you said it, and we'll delete it right out, and it'll come on right back down, and it's never been said. The other reason is because of the individual's past history with the law enforcement, we didn't know if police would come in and try and take the stuff or anything like that. Nothing like that's happened. I don't think it ever will, but it's just to be honest about it and be responsible to say if there's anything that you've done in the past that you have not been charged for or been acquitted of, please, let's just tell me and we'll get it out of there. Like, I don't want...
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. It never happened. I'm just a therapist. It doesn't happen. So all of that. And then when we got to the book, I condensed, because the interviews lasted 45 minutes. The first ones lasted 45 minutes to over 2 hours or something like that. That's it. Be as long as you want. So there's some that are... So I had to condense their stories because we jumped around a lot in the interview. We went from... I broke it down 0 to 5, 5 to 12, 12 to 16, gang life, post-gang life. And I broke it down like that because we had 0 to 5, you're mostly with your family. You're starting to understand where you belong, some street socialization. 5 to 12, you get into the school system. A lot more child welfare is a part of that. But 12, you get into the young offenders. And then 18, you move up. But to 16, it seems, is where a lot of the individuals start getting to high school and they start getting really hooked into it. And so it's gang life comes after that, and then post-gang. Because the individuals age range from 21 to 43 who are part of the project. So there's a big gamut of age range. So it's, that's why I tried to break it down to understand. But with the stories in there, once I condense it, I would go back and I would say, Dave, read your story. Is it right? So he would read it. Okay, no, you got this wrong. And he actually told me I did get something wrong. So this happened over here, it doesn't happen, right? Okay, so I went and changed it, brought it back. Is this right? Yeah. So then I would get the pictures and I would lay the pictures out. I said, are these pictures okay with you? Yes, they're okay. And I would do that with every single member to make sure that they all got to say, yeah, that's my story. And everything else. Just being responsible. I don't want to say something that's going to get them in trouble. I don't want them to read it and be like, wait a minute, that's not who I am. Because it's more about them, the whole research project, is about me. The other thing too, the one question I was always asked was, okay, you're giving us an honorarium, $40. You're giving us cameras. You're giving us a book. And you're giving money back to Straight Up. What the hell are you getting out of this? That was a big question I got. And I always said, I was honest, I get your story, I write a dissertation, and I get 3 letters behind my name, 2 in front. But that's going to set me up for life. Your stories are going to actually set me up for life if I do it in the right way and people acknowledge what I'm doing. Your stories have more of an impact on me and what's going to happen with my life than you getting this stuff right off the bat. And so most of the guys said, okay, as long as I said it's true. Like we were coming down here, and it was like, holy cow, that's an old guy walking. I'm like, yeah, you don't have to retire when you're on campus. They have to force you out or something. Like, I can work until I'm 85, 90 years old.
As long as you still talk,
Yeah,
you're good.
you're still good. And so, and he's like, yeah, you don't have to. So realistically, if I can ever get a tenure position, I'm set. It's just to get that tenure position. But I need these stories to write a dissertation to do it all, to do those steps. And that's what their stories give me. So that's a reciprocity giving back for. It's not like I didn't get anything from it, because I got a lot more. So these are some of the photos that are in here. A lot of the individuals, we talk about this cultural revitalization. We need to put culture back into these programs or things. Not really. Because a lot of the individuals who were part of the child welfare system don't know their family and their history, don't know their culture. So culture doesn't mean a lot, but a lot of it, what they mean together is a spirituality. How do we create a connectedness? How do we reconnect people to community? And that's where the spiritual level comes in here. It can either be through culture, it can be through Christian methods, any method whatsoever. This photo here, with photo voice, they can have metaphorical meaning, and that's what this one is here. The first picture, if you go in the book, you'll see that the eagle feather's all tattered, it's on top of the rag, and braid of sweetgrass is off the side. Basically what he was saying was that, I was sick. My culture was sick, I was sick, and the gang was my whole life, and that's why I was laid across. The last picture is this one, and the rag's to the side, and it's the same thing. I'm healthy, the eagle feather's healthy, he's healthier, but the rag is there because it'll always be there, because that's his family. His family is his family is the gang. There are members in it, and he'll never be able to pull himself totally away from it. But the lifestyle itself is not a part of who he is. So we got with the photos, it went deeper than just the interviews. So the interviews, I got a lot of the basics kind of stuff that I thought I was going to get. Some guys went a lot deeper than I thought they were going to go. But what the photos did was it allowed a conversation to go deeper, at a deeper meaning and a deeper level, where guys took more onus on what they were trying to do. This one's here, the 2 shadows. This is where his brother died in a car accident. The 2 shadows are to represent him and his brother standing side by side. This is a father-son. We can see the changing within the tattoos. One's an the old style, more traditional, moving more towards the Latino scripture writing. We're starting to do the identifications, the numbers. And then another picture of a guy and his kid. But they also taught me a lot of other stuff here. And one of the things we have to understand when we're dealing with street gangs is we can't keep focusing on this criminalization of individuals and locking them up, because it's trauma is what's going through a lot of their lives. Violence. Injection use. What a lot of the guys said was that, and this is with the studies and outside of it, that coke, weed, and alcohol are okay. You can do those. Those are seen as the party drugs. They're the ones that they're acceptable within the community. Needle dope and everything else outside is not okay. Am I running out of time? I can speed up.
Well, he ran a little bit late, so
I'm running out of time here.
Oh, I'll try and get this going. So needle dope, what one guy said was that you would get minutes as soon as they saw you do it, because they don't want a dope lead anything. They want somebody who's solid. They want somebody who's not focused on the drugs, that focused more on the activities or the money or the economics that's going on within the game. Everybody talks about shoes. What do they mean all the time? Well, they mean different things in different communities. Saskatoon, those colors are wanted. Here in Regina, no, you don't wear those colors in Regina. Again, the money involved, even a relationship with law up there. Historically, there was a relationship in Saskatoon between law enforcement and gang members in the early part of 2000. A gang would be up there and they'd have shotguns and they would be okay as long as nobody got hurt in the area. The police wouldn't bother them in that area, and they were just allowed to. And they ran that top floor. Then some stuff happened and all of that. What was interesting, again, we had to modify photo voice. The photo voice, you're supposed to give them the cameras, they come back to you. I went out with some of the guys to go and do this. So we broke into that building up there to get a picture of a window that was shot out, that he shot out. I was also here with him when he got that in Saskatoon. 5 minutes, he had his meal, his kit, his drugs, and a safe place to do it. No money with me and a cell phone. And the city of Saskatoon, didn't know the person. Then I want to talk about trauma real quick. When you think about trauma, the gun, this is one of the more powerful stories that was told. He wasn't sleeping. He ended up trying to he beat his way out of the gang. And was higher up, and his higher up tried to bring his brother underneath him, and stuff happened, and you're dead basically, because of how bad he beat up his higher up. So he left, but for 2 years, roughly a year and a half, 2 years, he was battling insomnia, so he wouldn't sleep. He'd be half awake, half asleep, half awake, half asleep, and he'd sleep next to that because he was so afraid of what was going to happen. And then one day, his little kid jumped on his leg, and he popped up with it and almost shot his kid. And then that's where he realized that this has to stop, and he got rid of it. So the trauma that's inflicted here, and here, and here, is very important because they're all connected. A lot of them start with the coke and the alcohol and everything else, and then you start getting into the violent lifestyle. I close my eyes and all I see are people's faces. One guy told me, she kept coming back to me and asking why. I couldn't sleep. So then I started using harder and harder drugs to try and sleep, to cope with the trauma. Because if we know addictions is just a cope with trauma, a traumatic event from the individual's lives. So they escalate in violence, they escalate in here, but even when they leave, there's still heightened trauma, because if we don't have mental health services for them, for individuals trying to get out, they're just stuck in the same cycle. And yeah, that guy in the cover, he was one of them who beat us up in Regina. Dave and I, we came down here. It's a funny story, you can ask later because we won't move through it. Again, the violence, prison system. And this is where this hyper-masculinity comes in. And it all started clicking with this one photo. It means nothing. Really, if you look at it, it's a car park. But what happened was, a guy was in the Cornwall Center, he was getting chased by some rivals, he got to a phone, he was able to use the phone, told the guy to pick him up on the other side of the street. He was running out of the Cornwall Center, 5 guys were chasing him, and he made it into the car. Now, any one of us who gets into a vehicle and people are chasing him to beat us up would say, drive the car, like, let's get out of here. Not him. See, because he saw his face being challenged. He saw his masculinity being challenged. So what does he do? He wraps a leather jacket around his arm, asks him if he has his knife underneath his seat. The guy said yes, it was a hunting knife like this. And he goes back into that parking lot and starts fighting the guys. He ended up walking out with a couple stab wounds, and 4 guys were laying on the ground, 5 guys were laying on the ground. He said he walked out, he didn't know what happened afterwards, he didn't know if the guys died or not, but he just made sure that they knew not to mess with him. So it was a way to protect himself. See, what we have to understand too is within this environment is that because you're working within illegal activities, you can't go to the police when you need protection. So if you have drugs on you and you get rolled for your drugs, you're always going to keep getting rolled for your drugs unless you stick up for yourself. But you can't just stick up for yourself. You have to go above and beyond what everybody else is doing so that they know not to mess with you. So this is what I was trying to understand through the interviews and everything else. Is what is this tough guys? What is this mask that you have to put on? Because a lot of the guys will say, you know what, I was fired. I was mean. I was like mean. But you talk to them and they're gentle. What does that mean? Well, I wake up and I look down and I put my mask on and I was this tough guy. So now we're going into that, again, that larger masculinity, that hegemonic masculinity, that tough, powerful individual. But you have to look at it as an experience, that opportunity that they have to do it. They don't have a business that they can use. They don't have that economic opportunity. They have their bodies that they can use, and their physical bodies. There were no emotions. You know, when you're a gangster, some people say, what's a gangster? Well, a gangster is you gotta be cold, you gotta be mean, you gotta be a good talker. The game is psychology, math, we look at it. You gotta learn how to count your money, you gotta learn how to talk. You gotta turn things around, you gotta learn how to make 10 bucks and a 20. When you have a conversation, somebody says this and this and this, we gotta turn it around and say, no, it's like this. I took over blocks that fought a lot of you guys, knife fights, socks, bats, chased with mace, shot at. There's a lot of stuff I went through. Every single one of the guys was stabbed, not once, but multiple times over the course of their life within the gang life. Half of them had been shot at, 2 were shot. So many of them had used weapons on others. So it's, and I'm not saying things that they would not be saying in front. I don't want to go into, but it's a hyper. It moves up. It's not just masculinity at a okay, I'm tough and then walk away. It has to escalate. If you don't escalate, then you're gonna get picked on again.
You're gonna get killed.
Well, killed either way a lot of times. So this is where I'm at right now, and we're looking at how I frame some of the stuff. The socially structured narcissistic machoism or machismo, like this idea of being a tough guy, but it's more than just being a tough guy, because you become a narcissist of yourself. Going over all the stuff that you guys said and keep reading it over and over and over again, before they even got into the gang, they were good at something. And they weren't just good at it, they said they were the best at it. So they had this ego that I was the best drug dealer around, I was tough, and that's all I knew how to do, and I was the toughest guy around, nobody would mess with me. So they have this ego, this narcissistic value, where they take risks above and beyond in order to prove themselves. But they're proving themselves within this hyper-masculine state. Violent men seem to have a strong sense of personal superiority, and their violence often seems to stem from a sense of wounded pride. So we look at socially construct Aboriginal kids to not feel good about themselves, they internalize the oppression. Well, here we go. How am I going to be? Yes, I'm an Indian. Yes, I'm here. Yes, this is who I am. This is who you think I am. But I'm going to be the best damn criminal or best damn thing that you think I am, and I'm going to prove it back to you, and I'm going to take what I need from you. So they integrate and they take that identity into themselves, and they lash out. So, and then machismo includes demonstration of strength and toughness as well as look crazy, wild. The guy, like I said, the guy who went into the thing, that's crazy. Crazy. Like, you guys have done some really crazy stuff. You even said now when you look back on it, I didn't even know what I was thinking when I was doing half this stuff. Then you get into the addictions part of it, because the craziness can't happen. Very few can do the crazy acts without the actual substances in their system. So that's a part of it. So what have been the outcomes so far? Brighter days ahead. Community presentations such as this in the past 2 weeks. This is again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 now on the campus that I've done about the research or the research process for the most part. National, international, like, see, this is what I get to do, guys. I get to go to Iceland because of this. I got accepted to go speak in Iceland. We got accepted to go speak in Vancouver as a group. So now what's that?
The UK?
I'm not going to the UK yet.
I got some email from some Henry Tuck. It was Henry Tuck, he was talking about your book to me.
Really? Oh wow, that's even better. I just thought we were across Canada. I was pretty happy that every university almost had it.
I'm on Facebook.
Sweet.
You just made him happy.
Oh yeah, I'd be thinking that. But through the book and everything else now, and with the Straight Up conference that was going on, Straight Up is getting a lot of publicity. Good publicity, but it's also stretching the organization thin at times too. So we got asked to go talk at a youth gang conference in Vancouver about the book and about everything else. So it said 5 people to come with me, and now I'm trying to search for money. You don't hear from money. I'm trying to find money to help, because you know what? I can find my way to get there. I can find grants for a university student, but it's harder to get grants for ex-gang members to go and talk about their stories and to be a part of it at the same time, because their stories are more important. Women in Straight Up have all, not all, the majority of them have come to me and said, when can we do something for us? Because I'm tired of the men. It's always men. And I told them when I first started this, I said that I would, let me finish this, and if we mess up, then we're gonna fix it for you and it'll be better for you than it'll be for the guys, so just wait for it. So that's where that research money's coming from. We're gonna try and put it towards doing a project with the women so they can start telling their stories. Because what's out there and what's going to be coming out there from an individual who I really dislike, and I really hope that you read his stuff and really challenge it, and if you like him and you're friends with him, keep it to yourself. But if you look at Mark Cotton's stuff,
Thank you.
hey, if you look at his stuff, hey, I'm not alone, thank you. If you read his stuff, he's coming out with another book on girls and gangs, and it is not good. Basically all it's saying is that women are just sexual objects, and they don't do anything except lay there and have kids.
Oh my God.
In a nutshell, that's what
Yeah.
okay, you heard him speak.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So that's why I want to work with the women. I want to get their stories out to try and challenge this narrative, because this narrative is very rarely
See,
challenged.
that's more damaging.
But it just supports that overgeneralization that I'm
Yeah.
saying with everything.
But I think also it's indicative of the scholarship and the research, community-based or otherwise, working with female gang members in gangs or not. It's not a very strong scholarship, so unfortunately he's contributing to a long pool of very poor scholarship that's been done. So if it can be a community-engaged project, there can be a direct response, which is good too, because it is a really bad dialogue of very submissive women that are just in service to male gang members.
And yeah, and that's not. See, the men have their bodies of strength. Women aren't as strong, but they have their sexuality. But they're not using it to be promiscuous, or that's all they are. They use it in order to access the goods and the services that men would get using their physical force. And some women are even more violent than men, but use different means in which to get it. So, but yet if we just,
I'll see you later tonight.
yeah, no, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm coming tonight.
Okay.
Apologies for leaving.
Also, the youth under 20, they want to do a project. The ones that are in Kilburn, they're looking at trying to get their stories out about what it is to be youth on the street today. And then, like I said, the last thing is the dissertation thing that I'm trying to work on and get finished too, sooner or later. And then these are the partnerships that have come about. I couldn't have done anything without IPHRC. They funded me when I first started, and they shouldn't have funded me, to be totally honest. Well, Joanne admits to it. She's
She
like,
goes, I know, she told me that story.
yeah, she said, you were, you got your funding on this, like, skin of your teeth, you should not have been funded. And
She believed in you.
she did, and my supervisor Caroline believed in me, and that's what allowed me to actually go through, because I shouldn't have been funded. I got pushed through a program where I'm talking to people how they're applying to PhD programs, I'm like, how, what? You have to do what to get in? Mine, 3 weeks I was in. Like, boom, boom, this is what I want to do. But again, it all goes back to relationships built, right? I had a relationship, I had something that was relevant, that people were interested in, they were interested in the project, they're interested in all of that. Straight up in the U of S for what they've done. And I know I've taken a lot of time and I shouldn't have done as much, because I want them to speak. Like, I want you, this should be yours, and I just